We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. We know within. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will.
Hello, viewers. Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of the Nana Yaa Yeboaa show. Today's show is particularly poignant in the sense that it talks about Ghana. It talks about Africans in the diaspora. And with me is a very special guest who is an oral historian, a custodian of the African diasporan history narrative, and rewriting and retelling that story. He is motivational, he is inspirational, and he has a futuristic look at how Africa needs to look like. Let me give you a little bit of background about today's event or today's show, the Decade of Return. 2019 marked the year of return for Africans taken from the west coast of Africa, Ghana in particular, to Jamestown in the US. So 1619 Jamestown, Ghana to 1619 Jamestown, Virginia. That is 400 years of our children, our mothers, our brothers, our relatives cross over the transatlantic at the Atlantic and enslaved either as prisoners of war or just commodities. Historians believe there are about in excess of maybe 12 million Africans who were shipped to the Americas. Today, Nii Koney, whose specialty is telling the story, keeping the story alive, will touch on the decade of return as opposed to just the year of return. Mr. Nii Koney.
Thank you very kindly.
Hello. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly well.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Nana Yaa. It's quite a pleasure. And I am whale proud and elephant glad to be with you today. Before we begin the story, I would like to begin with a humming of a particular song, which I believe is relevant to the Africa diaspora tragic event of slavery. So if you can hear me for 30 seconds, I will try to hum the song as it was originally hummed by slaves coming to the New World. This song is at the core of the African diaspora experience in the event of the slave or the transatlantic slave trade. And greetings to our listeners across the universe. Greetings from the hills of Kilimanjaro and from the banks of the River Nile. I welcome you all to this program in the spirit of Ubuntu, which means I am because you are. Welcome to a beautiful Sunday with my favorite sister, Nana Yaa Yeboaa.
Thank you. So give us a little bit context about who you are and what you did. I touched briefly on it, but you can give us a little bit more context as to who you are, what you do, and where you are based at right now.
My bio is actually as short and as brief as I am. And my name is, as you mentioned, Nii Koney. I am an African born in Ghana, Accra. I am an oral historian and passionate about particularly the African diaspora history. I am a publisher of a magazine relevant to the Africa diaspora experience called the Nile Valley Magazine. I am also the founder and executive director of the Africa Diaspora History Library, the very first kind in the whole of Canada. And I am the executive director of the Nile Valley Foundation. This is who I am, and this is what I do.
Beautiful. Symbolically, you are wearing black, mainly black and a little bit of red. Can you please let us know why you wearing this particular attire today?
Can I tell you what did you say, please?
I said symbolically you are wearing black and red.
Oh, yes. I thought that I should wear black and red. The red means the brothers and sisters who lost their life across the Atlantic on their way to the New World. And the black means strength, out of which we came and out of which we exist. Beautiful. So that's why I'm symbolically, and wrapping myself in a cloth is an ancient African tradition from Egypt all the way to West Africa, Ghana, and other countries as well. So wrapping is an authentic African way of dressing from Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Morocco, Egypt, all the way to Ghana. So beautiful. I'm wrapped.
You're wrapped, you wrapped, you wrapped. Yes, sir. You are indeed wrapped.
Yes.
So let's get to the importance of this conversation on Nana Yaa Yeboaa show. So viewers, you can follow the Nana Yaa Yeboaa show on Instagram. It's Filjo Multimedia Events. On Facebook, Nana Yaa Yeboaa. And as we come on and bringing you more educative, inspirational, and motivational programming, you share, or I share, and you subscribe, and all comments are welcome so we can make the show a great and better show. Now, I'm going to get to the nitty-gritty of 2019 in Ghana, West Africa. What marked 2019 as a great year in Ghana? As an oral historian, what is your view and what marked 2019 as a great year in Ghana?
2019 specifically is huge at so many levels. When you look at the Africa diaspora story, which I say to you that is the greatest story in human story. The diaspora story is a story of grace, a story of resilience, a story of struggle and redemption, hope and healing, the sheer transcendent power of belief and faith of a people. And it is the greatest human story ever told. We as a people cannot heal from what you do not know unless you accept before you can begin the healing process. It is only when all of our weaknesses are accepted as part of our humanity can our negative, broken self-images be totally transformed. Change only comes when you remember the past. So in remembering, you also be healed. So 2019 is the beginning of that healing process, especially for people of African descent in the New World. And that's why this particular event was launched by Ghana in 2019, remembering the first slave that landed in, as you mentioned earlier, with Virginia in the United States of America. Yes. And the subsequent 4-year mark that begins the year to return. And we term the term the year of return. Returning means go back through the door of no return to the door of return. And
why is this narrative, the door of no return and returning, so important to our psyche?
Returning means that we've arrived, and symbolically, there was a diasporan, I believe from Caribbean descent, specifically from Jamaica, who passed away. Now, this young man was passionate about the return to Africa, but it didn't happen in his lifetime. I am told that when he passed on, the coffin was brought to Ghana and symbolically took the coffin through the door of return, meaning historically, ontologically, he has returned. So going through that door of return, perhaps not even at that particular door, but having in your mind, in your spirit, that I'm returning. That's why the spirit is not only physical, it's also spiritual, it's also emotional, it's also historical, and then the physical. So we have several levels of return, and we must accept them one at a time.
In totality. Okay. So it's like, from what you're telling me, and if I can put it in African terminology, breaking a curse. Will that fit into the description? That returning through the door of no return is breaking a curse put upon us by those who enslaved us.
The word return is very powerful. If you are a Ghanaian, you know the concept of Sankofa, which means we are going back. Sankofa means let's go back and return to our inner spirit, the good things that we have left behind. So Sankofa is the word that the African diasporans are applying to their situation, meaning they are returning to their motherland to reconnect with the woman from the womb from which they came.
Yes.
So that return is everything that we have wished for as diasporans. And this decade is our decade to make that return.
And as we're speaking about the door of no return, I chanced upon a poetry by one of Ghana's foremost poets, Mauli Eje. And for many people, and maybe you will attest to it later, you attest to it, that we normally know about the Cape Coast Castle, Elmina Castle, maybe some Christianborg, and that where many of people were taken into slavery to this part of the world, the Americas and the Caribbean. I just recently found out there was another castle which was also used along the Cater shore, and it was Fort Presenstein that was used. Yes, so I'm
there are
going
so
to
many.
read a short poetry from Mauli Ejay on this fort. So the title of the poem is Fort Presenstein. He once bestrode the shifting coastline like a legend carved in stone. How many times change and the mighty fall? The seasons have brought him to his knees, stripped him to his underskirt in scattered masonry. He's gone with his heritage of gunpowder, whiskey, and manware, Presenstein, who once imprisoned our souls in concrete and drowned the voices of the priestess with the hybersaw roar of his mounted cannons. In his old compound littered with echoes against the boisterous chorus of pounding waves, witches now gather for a carnival and hum dirges for a long forgotten anti-hero. Basically, the sea has eaten the castle. Please continue.
That's wonderful poem, and it's so relevant to the time in which we live.
Yeah.
One of the things that I try to reach out to the Africa diaspora community and the challenges that we face at this point is that 60 plus years ago, we had leaders who spoke to us from the ground up.
Yes.
We had leaders who were selfless.
Yes.
We have our ancestors and their spirit that spoke to us from the depths of our soul.
Yes.
So our music, our dance, everything we did in the 60s reflects our struggle.
Who we were.
For some
yes.
reason, we don't seem to have the same commitment, the same selflessness as we did that time. And the question is, what happened? Why don't we have the type of leaders we had 60 plus years ago? Leaders who were selfless, but what we do have for the most part at this point, from where I'm sitting, are Black leaders who are Black.
Yes.
But they are not Black leaders. They are leading Blacks. Now, a leading Black is different.
It seems that we have lost Nii Koney for a second over there. We will wait for him to come back onto the program. But basically, the story of the return and the decade of return is not only to focus on only a year of this celebration, as much as I am aware of, is also the notion of beyond the return. But beyond the return, what is it about it that really calls to and engages most of our African diasporan to still maintain that persistency and the consistency and the urgency and the love and attention that they showed in reconnecting to Ghana, to Africa, to the motherland as they did in 2019. Thus, as I'm aware with discussions with Nii Koney, is that the decade of return gives a longer period of time that Those that have
Could
not
you
been
hear?
able to, and those that are able to, will come on. So Nii is back on. He's going to continue with where he left off, and we're going to merge all conversations together. So whilst you were a bit offline, I was talking about the need for why the year of return was so short, and the need to continue the return of Africa's diaspora to the motherland, and why the decade of return is relevant as at now. So before we get to its relevancy as the decade of return as an extension of the year of return, please continue with your conversation.
What I was saying is the missing link that seems to go on across the world in terms of Black leadership. And I am a child of the 60s, and therefore I do know the commitment of the type of leaders we had at that time. But as I look around today, and as I mentioned earlier, we now have leading Blacks, not Black leaders. Most of the people in the political arena and the social arena are leading Blacks and not Black leaders. Now, what is the difference between a leading Black and a Black leader? A Black leader is selfless and will not count the cost. A leading Black is someone who have become popular by virtue of what they do. And they are individualistic, they represent nobody by themselves. So usually they will not stick to the issue at hand in helping collectively every Black person. They are quite selective in the battles they fight. And we must be very careful.
Are we to say that the period, these times are part of the reason why we have a difference? These Black leaders these blacks who are leading blacks. I do believe in the 60s, your period of time that you're talking about, these Black leaders, not leading Blacks, Black leaders were fighting a cause, and they fought a cause that they were willing, come hell or high water, to lay their lives down for the African continent.
Right.
Am I right in saying that?
Yeah. But the challenge is at that time, Nana Yaa, that we faced at that time, they stood up to the test and showed their method. And we are now being called upon to continue from where they left off. But for some reason, we have taken our eyes off the idea of the common good that we call Agape Love. That I am because of who you are in the spirit of Ubuntu. Now we are thinking about individualistic understanding of what our issues are. So we are in the box and not thinking for the common good. Yes.
Okay. So we need to get outside the box.
Yes, we need to think outside the box.
Okay.
We need to think in the spirit of Ubuntu, that I am because you are.
So
we do that.
What you said actually leads me to the next question.
Okay. Okay.
Which is, what do you believe is the relationship between the African diaspora, you and I, and the descendants of our four great and forefathers, cousins, and the continent of Africa?
Your voice seems to be wobbling quite a bit. Make that question clear to me once again, please.
What the question I asked was, what do you believe is the relationship between the African diaspora and the continent of Africa?
Relationship
between African diaspora and the continent.
In the people of the continent. Okay. Although there are forces that works against such meaningful relationship between the Africans on the mainland and the African diaspora. But even these factors would be no barrier if there were more determination on the part of the Africans from the mainland. Historically, only few diplomats during the 60s made the effort to connect with the African diaspora. I remember specifically diplomats from Liberia, Ghana, and I believe Zambia. These were the three diplomats historically that made an important point to connect to the African diaspora every time they were in the United States or in the Caribbean. Besides that, or since that time, we've never had African diasporan making an effort to connect with the African diasporans, whether in the Caribbean, in the South America, or in the United States of America. African countries hire few diasporans as specialists or consultants on contracts totaling millions of dollars. You know, and these contracts are offered to Western companies. The need to use diasporans in strategic advisory or skill roles by the Africans is missing. And so the return is a point where we meet the African diasporans halfway and begin to look at what the return means to us. And this is the major reason why the Africa Diaspora History Library is establishing and relaunching and extending the year of return to the decade of return. Because
why the decade?
Yes, to make it the decade of return. So we have 10-year period to work out these details. If you recall, when Ghana initiated or launched the year of return, there was quite enthusiasm, excitement, happiness. And people were coming to countries, not only Ghana, Senegal. If you recall, there are a lot of castles in Senegal as well. There are people from Angola, in the territory, Mozambique. There are people from all over Africa. But that was cut short with the pandemic, I believe, in March, when that started. So if you realize now, we are not talking about the year of return. And my question is, it took us 400 years to come to this point, to rejuvenate the conversation on returning. And so to be able to keep the excitement and to keep our eyes on the ball, we must extend the return into a decade of return to give us enough time to be able to complete the journey of return. And when I say return, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just the physical. The other important element or part of that return should be emotionally, spiritually, and also historically connecting to the African diaspora.
Beautiful, beautiful. The other thing is, we tend to use the term diaspora. I think I should have established this right at the beginning. We tend to use the term diaspora. For some of us, we know and understand who the diasporans are. And you corrected me on one point. So I would like you to explain which people constitute the African diaspora. Because some of us think we are not diasporan, but when we get to Ghana, we get to the African continent, we get lost somewhere in the mix.
Nana Yaa, that's a good question. And almost everywhere I go, people ask the question, who are the diasporans? Or even what is the word diaspora means? And I've always said that the word diaspora, I believe, is a Greek word meaning people who has been tragically uprooted from their ancestral homeland.
Okay.
So that is the definition. People who has been against their will uprooted from their ancestral homeland. But at this point, we do have three levels of diasporans. So the indigenous diasporans are African diasporans who were brought in chains from the continent. And then we have the second diasporan, who are children of immigrants like myself or you and I, who were born here, but their parents are immigrants. So those are the second diasporans. Then the third diasporans are people like you and I who came here as immigrants and who have lived here for the past, anybody who have lived here past 25 years, you also become a diasporan. And so we have three levels. Like myself, I consider myself to be an African diaspora. And so, yeah, whether I'm here or in the continent, I represent the diaspora. So those are the difference between the different levels of diasporans across the world.
Beautiful. This conversation is very, very heavy. I think we'll have to come back and do another session which focuses on another part of Africa and its diaspora, because it's a very, very needed, constructive conversations that need to be had. Now, when 2019, a few issues came out with the Ministry of Tourism in Ghana and the experiences of the African diasporans when they went back to the motherland, to Ghana, for, say, spiritual or for mental or, for healing, from healing. And what were some of the issues that were shared with you?
I've always mentioned to the indigenous Africans that if it were not for the African diasporan agitation and admittedly limited political power, Africa would be even less of a subject of interest in the West than it is now. So the African diasporan are the ones who have kept Africa on the world map. And I've constantly reminded the Africans that we owe the African diasporan great gratitude for having kept Africa in the minds of the world. Now, as you look around today, if you see anybody carrying a flag high up, 89% of the time is an African diasporan. Because they struggle 24/7. The Africans go to sleep after 7 hours of work. And so, what I'm saying to you is that the issue of the diaspora return will be the beginning of the redemption of the continent of Africa.
Yes. Yes.
And until we bring the African diaspora back to the mother Africa, Africa will never rest.
Okay. So the one other thing that I think most of us, most Africans born on the continent, or most Africans that are in Ghana or parts of Africa, the other concept that normally we kind of do not understand, or it separates us, as Pan-Africanism. I know this conversation is not about Pan-Africanism, but there are Pan-Africanists who were the architects of the reawakening of the African to the African, how do we call it, state of being. As you said, to fight for our independence. Could you please break down what the ideology of Pan-Africanism is from where you come from, your understanding of Pan-Africanism tied into this decade of return?
Any ism is a way of people to gain freedom. So when you hear the word ism, never mind the pan. An African diasporan in the person of Harriet Tubman.
Yes.
She was trying to flee or free African slaves from the United States to Canada for freedom.
Yes.
And she said, I saved about 1,000 people. I could have saved 2,000 if only they knew they were slaves.
Slaves, that's right.
She was not a Pan-African. So the Pan-Africanism is an extension of a people yearning for freedom, economic and political freedom.
Yes.
So Pan-Africanism is not something that you have to be special to belong to it. If you are a minority,
it's an ideology.
Yes, if you are oppressed, you need something. So Pan-African is a group of people yearning for their God-given freedom from oppression.
Beautiful. Wow. Oh, Lord have mercy. This is a lot to talk about. The decade of return and even the sheer number of African descent that were brought into the Americas. Like when I started this this interview, in the upwards of 12 million human beings shipped as cargo. For even those that died on route from wherever that they were taken from are not mentioned, you know. So I'm hoping that with the decade of return, have you made any headway or leeway in asking the government to, rather, instead of using the year beyond the return, to look at it as a decade of return and plan accordingly?
Are you asking if I have contacted the government? Is that your question?
Yes.
I think that quite often we as Africans from the mainland look at government as an alien, but we are government. And so government only works when the citizens recognize their duty. So if you want government to be efficient, we as citizens must rise up and have a template and help the government to function properly and hold the government accountable for what we put to the government. So government is you and I, and believe that if we can work out details and approach government, we will make government job a lot easier and we will function together in a lot better atmosphere.
Beautiful. Viewers, we've almost come to the end of our program. I've been having this conversation with Nii Koney, a historian, publisher, activist, and I stress on historian, oral historian, because that is a tradition that you carrying on, telling and retelling the African story from the African perspective. Am I right?
It's been very nice talking to you. I am quite at home with you, and I hope that we will continue the conversation. And if I have to give you my last word, as I always do, reference to my favorite writer and public speaker, a sister from Nigeria in the person of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Oh, Chimamanda, yeah, Chimamanda.
In the danger of a single story.
Single story, so yes.
This conversation is to change the narrative that we come from a dark continent, that we are people who do not have a belief system, that we do not know science or mathematics, that we do not subscribe to anything made by us but made by others, which is all which is all false. So stories matter, and this is why we have such platform to tell and to share our story. So stories
absolutely
matter. Many stories do matter.
Yes.
Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize.
Yes.
Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity.
Thank
so go
you.
on and share our story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nii. We hope to see you in discussing a different aspect of the African narrative, African story later on. Viewers, thank you for tuning in. Those that have tuned in, I'm tuning for insights. Nana Sase in Ghana, thank you very much. We will be producing more Nana Yaa Yeboaa shows with more insight, motivation, and inspiration. Follow me on Facebook, Nana Yaa Yeboaa, and on Instagram, it's Philjo Multimedia Events. Thank you, Nii. See you some other time.
Peace.
Bye.
DORC TV.